Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Luke Fickell, the Wisconsin Badgers continue to build what I think is going to be a monster class for them in 2025. It gets better Monday afternoon as four-star offensive lineman Hardy Watts committing to Wisconsin. And for the Wisconsin fans, many of you guys know I'm a massive Michigan fan. It came down to Michigan, Wisconsin. I'll say this is one of my favorite offensive linemen in the 2025 cycle. I'm bummed that he's not coming to Michigan, but I'll say this to the Wisconsin fans. I think you guys are getting a really good offensive lineman that what stands out to me the most is not only is he 6'6", 290, a phenomenal athlete for the size. This kid is a technician on the offensive line. One of the most technically developed offensive linemen I've seen in this 2025 cycle. And as much as Luke Fickell's coming into this Wisconsin program and trying to develop a little bit more athleticism and explosiveness on the offensive side of the football, you make no mistake about it. This Wisconsin team is still going to try to control the line of scrimmage, and they're doing a really good job building the offensive line through the high school recruiting trail over the last two classes. Fired up to get into Hardy Watts. Want to kind of take a bird's eye view approach on what Wisconsin's doing in 2025. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Wisconsin fans. It's been a blast tracking Luke Fickell on the recruiting trail. You guys have shown a ton of support to the boys. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Hardy Watts first, dive into a little bit of the film, and then we'll have that conversation regarding what Wisconsin's doing in this 2025 cycle. You get into Hardy Watts and say, one, I think he gives you some versatility. I think a lot of programs and recruiting services, see Hardy Watts as an interior offensive lineman, which I would probably agree is the highest ceiling that he has. He can be an elite offensive guard at the next level because how he operates in a phone booth when he's engaged with opposing defenders, that's probably where he's at his best. But you take a look at the film, plays right tackle at the high school level. He has tackle athleticism. This is a guy that if you need him to play offensive tackle, I certainly think he's capable of doing that in the Big Ten. So you're getting an offensive lineman that's versatile, that can play guard, that can play tackle. And that's a lot more important than I think a lot of people give credit. Now, you talk about getting your best five offensive linemen on the football field, having a guy like Hardy Watts that can play both, I think, at a high level. It really lets you get your best five offensive linemen on the football field. Hardy Watts brings you versatility, but he also brings you a guy that a lot of offensive linemen are projects. You got to reform the body. You got to teach a lot of technique. I look at Hardy Watts and say maybe 1 year in a college weight room to kind of get that man strength, if you will. Going into year two of Hardy Watts' career, it is really hard to see him not being a starter on this Wisconsin offensive line just because of how developed he is from a technical standpoint. This is a guy that you just get the sense knows how to play the sport of football at a very high level. You dive into the film, there's a lot of different things you like. And I think my favorite aspect of Hardy Watts is how he operates when he's engaged. I mean, this kid has some big time power in the lower half. And when he's engaged with opposing defenders, he's just moving guys off the ball kind of routinely. He fires out of his stance extremely well. Hand placement's always phenomenal, and he's just dogging guys. This is a guy that when he's engaged, again, you see him get out of his stance, and we're just going to take this defensive lineman, put him 20 yards into the defensive backfield. Really good in pass protection as well. And this is a guy that is a clean operator. He's a functional athlete. You see those feet moving, not letting tackles get to his outside shoulder. This is a polished offensive lineman in pass protection. He can do some of this stuff too, which I think is really important in this Wisconsin offense, where you look at one of the bigger changes that Luke Fickell's injecting and Phil Longo's injecting into this Wisconsin offense. It's, hey, we're going to operate in a little bit more space. Not everything is going to be so condensed and in a phone booth. You need offensive linemen that can block outside the tackle box and get to the perimeter. Hardy Watts at 6'6", 290, the body composition is so strong. He carries that weight so well. He has no problem, getting to the perimeter and picking up second-level defenders and operating in a little bit of space. I think that's a massive story for Wisconsin as they kind of go through this process of reshaping the offense. again, when he's engaged, he's just a guy that the grip strength, the lower body strength, it's so strong. A guy that when you ask him to get on his down blocks, he's just moving people off the line of scrimmage. It's just kind of hard to find offensive linemen that can move bodies off the line of scrimmage like Hardy Watts can, but then also operate in space like Hardy Watts can as well. You kind of don't get the best of both worlds for a lot of those kind of offensive linemen. For a guy like Hardy Watts, he can do a lot of those different things. He can be an athlete in space, but he can also just be one of those offensive linemen that you want him to just move people off the line of scrimmage, road grade a little bit. Hardy Watts can certainly do that too. He has that nasty in him as well. And you take a look at Wisconsin in this 2025 class, it's going to be a top 15 class when they add Hardy Watts into the calculation. I think one of the conversations we had about Wisconsin with Luke Fickell coming in is there's going to be a little bit more emphasis on recruiting some athletes on the perimeter. You've seen them do that in the transfer portal, but you kind of make no mistake about it. Luke Fickell's still going to develop the line of scrimmage. I think he still wants this Wisconsin program to be a team that's controlling the line of scrimmage, that's running the football at a high level, and you kind of see that reflected in the offensive linemen that they're bringing in. You go back to the 2024 class, a top 50 national prospect, Kevin Haywood, joining this Wisconsin team, going to be a true freshman. You take a look at 2025, Logan Powell, Nolan Davenport. Now you add Hardy Watts. This offensive line class for Wisconsin is really strong as well. And one of those things that's really important, we talk a lot about it, not just for Wisconsin, but for a lot of programs across the country, is you want to make sure you're recruiting your offensive linemen at the high school level, because it's really hard to address that position in the transfer portal. You can look at a lot of different positions and say, all right, wide receiver or a running back, we can go get those names in the transfer portal. So if we miss on one in the high school recruiting class, we can address that in the portal. You look at the offensive line position, everybody wants starting offensive linemen, and there's just not that many quality offensive linemen that are in the transfer portal. So what does that mean is you got to make sure you're getting these kind of bodies, these offensive linemen in the high school ranks. Luke Fickell filling it up on the offensive line. I'm really fired up about what Luke Fickell can be doing at this Wisconsin program, where we know Luke Fickell is one of the best player developers and program builders that there is in the country. We saw him do that at Cincinnati. I think what excited everybody about him coming to Wisconsin is taking that player development in that culture building and injecting it in a program that probably has the capability of recruiting at a little higher level than Cincinnati did. And you're seeing Luke Fickell do that in this recruiting class for Wisconsin. You combine the talent acquisition with what Luke Fickell can do from a player development standpoint. I think that's what fires you up the most about this ceiling of Wisconsin. You make no mistake about it. Why did they move away from Paul Chryst and bring Luke Fickell in? Is they wanted to take that next step as a program. You could have kept Paul Chryst for the next 10 years and won 8 to 9 games every single year. I think this Wisconsin administration and this program as a whole looked at Wisconsin and said, hey, how do we take that next step? It's going out and getting a guy like Luke Fickell, and you're seeing him do that on the recruiting trail. It's going to pay off on the field. I think we're all confident of that. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.